In the last video, we looked at how to get the equation, or three equations of a line, given simply 2 points. In this video, I want to show you how you could do the same thing using your calculator and not having to do quite so much algebra. It takes a little bit more thought. So we're going to take our calculator, and what we need to do is we need to put in the point of the points that were given here. Okay, I'm going to move this up. Okay, so I need to be able to enter these points and I need to be able to graph them. So there's a place in my calculator called Stat. So if I go to Stat, I'm going to edit my data. So we can think of points as my data. So I'm going to edit, and you'll see that I have list 1, list 2, list 3, and so forth. Okay? So if you think of list 1 as your x values and list 2 as your y values. So I'm first going to put in my x values. So I'm going to put in -11, and then I'm going to push enter, and then I'm going to push 2, and then I'm going to push enter. Okay? So those were my x1 and my x2 values. Then I'm going to go over to my y values. So my first y value that goes with the -11, they have to go together, you can't mix it up, is -23, and my next one is 16. Okay, so now notice I have the coordinate -11, -23, 2, 16. Okay, so they have to be written as you would a coordinate. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my y equals. I'm going to turn my plot on. So how do I do that? There's two ways I can do that. I'm going to show you an easy way to do it. So I want to do the equation of a line. So we think of y as I want to make an equation, or I want to write a function. So I go to my y equals, I have to turn my plot on. So if I push my up arrow, it highlights that plot on, and then I simply push enter, and if I migrate down, you see that plot 1 is highlighted. Okay, so what do I want to do? I want to make a line go through these 2 points. That's called a regression. So I'm going to get out of this screen. I'm just going to do second quit, and I'm going to go back to Stat, and I'm going to ask the calculator to calculate a linear regression. Lin-reg means linear regression. So if you notice this says ax plus b, isn't that like mx plus b? Okay, so that's what it is. So I can either scroll down to number 4, or I can push the number 4, and then I will get this screen. Linear regression, and it's telling me the form. Now before I do anything, I have to tell the calculator I want it to put the equation it's going to give me into my y equals function. So I have to tell it what variable I want it to go to. I want it to go to my y variable. So you see this button here, VARS, that stands for variables. We call it VARS. So I'm going to push my VARS button. I want my y variables, so I'm going to toggle over to that. My y variable is going to be a function, so I push enter, and I want to put it in y1, so I'm going to push enter again. So my screen looks like this, but I have to push enter one more time, and if you notice, it gives me y equals ax plus b, where a is 3 and b is 10. Wow, that was the equation that we got when we did this by hand, isn't it? So I'm going to push my y equals, and it very nicely shows me 3x plus 10. So I just now have it in standard form. Slope-intercept form. So if you see, what did we do here? First, when we did a longhand, we had to do a point-slope form, but when we used the calculator, we went right into slope-intercept form. So I now need to do the other 2 forms. I'd have to do some math to do it, a little bit, but not a whole lot. So let's look at that. So my calculator tells me that in standard form, excuse me, I keep saying that, slope form, I want to get it to standard form. So slope form, I have y equals 3x plus 10. But I want to get it into standard form. And remember, standard form is ax plus by equals c. So I just needed to get my x over to here. So that means I'm going to have to subtract 3x from both sides of my equal sign. So then that gives me negative 3x plus y equals 10. Well, that's what I got when I did it longhand. That was pretty easy. I put the points in. The calculator told me the slope-intercept form. I did very little algebra. I got it in standard form. The last thing I need to do is I need to put it in point-slope form. So what did I need for point-slope form? Well, I need a point, right? So that would have been y1. And what else did I need? I needed the slope. Don't we have the slope somewhere in one of these equations? And then I needed another point, which weren't we given a point? We were, weren't we? So in this case, I have y minus, well, y1 doesn't matter. Let's look over here. I can pick either this point or this point. Remember when we did a longhand? I picked that point because there were no negatives. So let's do the same thing. We're going to pick the point 2, 16. So if I'm picking the point, I'll write the point over here. This is my point. 2, 16. That's my point. So that means it's going to be minus 16 is equal to, well, what's my slope? Didn't I determine my slope right here in slope-intercept form? So my slope is 3. And then I have x minus x1. Well, x1 is 2. There we go. Done. I did my slope form using the calculator, did very little algebra, did standard form, and then again, virtually did no algebra here, just plugged in the values that I had for point slope form. Did it all on my calculator. Done. Okay, so the last thing I need to do is I needed to find my y-intercept and my x-intercept. So remember, I'm going to do this in red, my x-intercept and my y-intercept. I'm going to let the calculator tell me these as well. Okay, so I have to think my x-intercept, I'm looking for x when y is 0. My y-intercept, I'm looking for y when x is 0. Okay, so I could use my calculator and see where y is 0 and where x is 0 and see if I find the point that I'm looking for. So a lot of you are tempted just to go directly to the graph and try to get it from here. The problem is this is not -3. And this is kind of off my screen here, so it's hard for me to tell. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my table. So I'm going to do second table. Oh, look at that. X is 0, y is 10. Okay, so that would be, this is 0, 10. I already knew that though, right? I knew that from using my slope-intercept form, that my intercept for the y-axis would be 0, 10. But what about the x-intercept? That's a little trickier because I need to find where y is 0. So if I'm looking here, I'm going to scroll up. Y is getting smaller, smaller, smaller. Oh, but it jumps. It goes from 1 to -2. It's not telling me what the value of x is when y is 0. So there is a term that we use, and our calculator can still do this for us. is a little tricky. I'm going to introduce it to you now because this is something in Algebra 2 you really need to know like the back of your hand. Better than the back of your hand. I don't know about you, but I don't know the back of my hand that well. Okay, so what we're looking for here is where y equals 0, and that's fondly called the zero of the function. Okay? That's fondly called the zero of the function. There are other things we call it too, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you what those are now as well. It's also known as root. Of course, it's known as x-intercept. So we have the x-intercept, we have y equals 0, we have the zero of the function, we have the root, and we have the word solution. Okay? So in this case, solution is just by itself because we have another situation where we use the word solution, but it means something slightly different. So we're going to find the zero of the function in our calculator. So let's go back to our graph. So the zero of our function is where y equals 0, and y equals 0 everywhere on that x-axis. In fact, that's the line y equals 0. So I want to find this place right here. So if I go to where it says, see how it says trace? Right above it, it says calc. So when it's in blue, you're going to push the blue button. So second, calc. And lo and behold, do you see a word that says 0? That means you're going to look for the zero of the function. Now pay close attention to what the calculator is going to do because it can get very confusing. I'm going to go to number 2, the 0, and notice what it says here. It says left bound. So let's look back at the graph that I drew up here. Left bound. Left bound of what? I want to be left of the point that I'm interested in. So I want to be over on this side on my graph. So where am I if I'm to the left? That means I'm somewhere down here. Any of these places down here, I'm to the left of that point, correct? So where is my cursor right now? It's where x is 0, which is here. I want to bring it down here somewhere because then it's going to be to the left of that point. So I'm going to go left. Okay. So remember what I said here? Anywhere over here is to the left because if I go up here, my value of x is over here, right? That's to the left. So I'm going to push enter. See how it gave me this little caret here? On the newer calculators, it actually is going to give me a line down. So this caret is to the left of the point I want. Now notice how this says right bound. So right bound, if I'm looking at my graph over here, anything on this side is to the right of the point that I want. So all of these points, x values, are to the right. So I'm going to move my toggle to the right. So notice that the point that I want to find the value of is here. This is to the right of that. So I'm going to push enter. So again, it gave me another caret. So it's going to look between these two arrows. Is the point I'm interested in between those two arrows? Yes, it is. Notice it says guess. I'm just like, whatever. I push enter. Notice how it gave me the 0. It says the word 0. That's how I know I got it. My cursor's right where I want it. It says x is equal to negative 3.333333 and y is 0. Okay, but your teacher keeps telling you, I don't want decimals. And you're not quite sure how to make that into a fraction. So this is what we do. We go to our main screen, and I'm going to put in negative 3.33333. I'm just going to put in a lot of those in there. Just crazy. Go mad crazy with those. Okay? Then I'm going to do math, frac, I have to push enter after that, and notice how it gave me negative 10/3. So that means, going back to here, that I know that my x-intercept is negative 10/3, comma, 0. I was able to do this entire problem using my calculator and some vocabulary and a little bit of thinking through what it was that I needed to accomplish.